If you have older siblings, then you know exactly what I'm going through right now. Older siblings, they're always there for you. Generally speaking, you get along, they've got your back, and they're somebody that you can trust. Well, Jake has always been like a big brother to me, and we've had our fair share of disagreements. Contrary to what he says, yes, I do have better hair. I believe I am more athletic, but there is one debate that rages on from the time that we met till right now. And ladies and gentlemen of Headliner Nation, I am here to finally put an end to it. Hit that like button because I end this debate today. Headliner Nation, what's going on? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with my first set of must-have wide receivers for the 2020 season. I've got a real in-depth video for you here, and two wide receivers, one of which, yeah, he's getting some respect, but not nearly as much as he should, and the other one could be in a Rodney Dangerfield skit because that's how little respect that he is currently getting. And I do have a debate that I have to end with Jake today. But first, we're going to talk about Kenny Golladay from the Detroit Lions. Kenny Golladay, again, lots of people are buying into him for the most part, but there still seems to be some concerns about how exactly he will produce in the 2020 season. Last year, a pretty good season, 113 targets, 65 receptions. He did end up with 1,190 receiving yards, which was 6th in the league, and he ended up leading the league with 11 touchdowns. A lot of people probably did not expect Kenny Golladay to end the season with the most receiving touchdowns in the NFL, but he was able to do that. Now, Detroit used to have one player with the nickname Big Play, and Big Play Darius Slay, but maybe it's time that we pass that on to Big Play Golladay, because that is where his game really grew last season. He had 6 receptions of 40-plus yards, which tied him for 3rd in the NFL, 4 touchdowns of 40-plus yards, which was tied for 1st, and he had 5 games of 100-plus yards, which was tied for 3rd. He really did a better job of winning down the field last season. And we go downtown Detroit in 2020 again because he could be in for an even bigger season. Now, last year, when you look at players that had at least 50% of their team snaps at wide receiver, Kenny Golladay stood up to the best of them when it came to going downtown. He had an average depth of target of 16.14 yards, which was 5th. His yards per target was 10.53, which was 6th. His yards per reception was 18.31, which was 3rd. And he averaged 3.85 fantasy points per touch, which was 2nd in the NFL. But it doesn't even stop there. Again, with at least 50% of their team snaps on his deep targets, okay, and again, deep balls, deep targets, deep receptions, it's anything that's 20 or more yards down the field. Deep targets last year, 5th in the league with 34. His deep receptions, 16, which was tied for 1st. His deep yards, 628 yards, was 2nd. His catchable deep passes of 18 was tied for 1st. And his deep touchdowns of 5 was tied for 2nd. His deep percentage last year came out to 31.9%. He was the only wide receiver in the NFL with at least 100 targets that had 30% or more of his targets being deep down the field. So again, he put up some good volume last year, but that is really where he took a step forward, was being that type of deep threat. Now, not only was he a deep threat, he was a red zone threat as well. And I think some people are overlooking this because last year for his red zone targets, he had 34, 5th, tied for 5th in the NFL. His red zone touchdowns of 9 was tied for 1st. His red zone target percentage was 30.1%. That was 8th. His end zone targets were 14, tied for 2nd. His end zone target percentage of 12.4% was 8th, and his end zone reception percentage of 7.7% was 9th. There is one thing when we're looking at stud wide receivers, guys that we can say, man, they deserve high draft picks because I know what I am getting with them every single time. One guy that comes to mind is DeAndre Hopkins, a guy that really has earned the title of QB proof. But has Kenny Golladay also potentially earned that title this year? Now, with Matthew Stafford last year, before he got hurt, he was off to a good start. In those first 8 games of the season, 62 targets, 35 receptions, 640 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But Matthew Stafford goes out with his back injury, and everybody yells, sell. Sell, sell, sell Kenny Golladay. He can't keep it up. He's going to go down. There is no way they can do it without Matthew Stafford. Well, they ended up having a guy named David Blough step in, okay? And when your last name is Blough as a quarterback, well, you're probably in trouble. But you know what? It really wasn't that bad. He ended up playing 8 games last season with David Blough as the quarterback, 54 targets, 30 receptions, 550 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So yeah, did take a little bit of a step back, but he was still able to decently produce at the position with David Blough stepping in for Matthew Stafford. Some of you might remember the Thanksgiving Day game where Kenny Golladay went off in the first quarter and screwed over a lot of people because we didn't think that there was any way against that Bears defense that Golladay was going to have a big day, and he ended up going out there and doing that. With Kenny Golladay, he did take that step forward last year. He was a big playmaker. But don't forget that they're going to be a little bit healthier this year, and they have added to the running back position. So Kenny Golladay could even be more wide open in 2020 than he was in 2019. We've got TJ Hawkinson back this year. He's going to be a really good intermediate target for Matthew Stafford. Speaking of health, Matthew Stafford. He seems to be back and ready to go. The back doesn't seem to be that big of an issue moving forward. If it had been, I'm sure the Lions would have drafted a quarterback, and they didn't. So I think we're good there. And then also they added DeAndre Swift, a big-time playmaking running back that not only can use his feet on the ground, but catch the ball in the air and do a lot of things that way as well. So Kenny Golladay is set up for 2020 to be a big-time playmaker, but maybe he's going to see some more volume because he's going to have some more one-on-one coverage, and he's going to have some more opportunities than what we saw last season. Now, before we move on to our next guy, I have to make sure that we throw this out here that this is our Manscaped must-have wide receiver video for 2020. That's right, Manscaped is one of our official sponsors for the 2020 season, and you can head over to manscaped.com and use our promo code HEADLINERS, all capital letters, and get 20% off your next purchase. So many things that you can get from there, and again, you can get everything for 20% off. Manscaped.com. Make sure you head over there because your balls will thank you. Well, we come to the point of the video where it's time, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of days ago, Jake dropped his Do Not Draft wide receiver video. And in that video, he had Amari Cooper. Now, for several weeks, Jake has known that my first must-have wide receiver video was going to have Amari Cooper. So this turned into us having a debate and finally hashing this out. Now, I saw a lot of you commenting on that last video, agreeing with Jake, saying you're never going to touch Amari Cooper. But just listen. Even if I don't change your mind, I just want you getting a little bit more of a thought process about Amari Cooper and not just dismissing him right away, because I have some really good information you do not want to miss. Okay, so let's talk about Amari Cooper and why I have him as a must-have wide receiver in 2020. Now, with Amari Cooper, again, people are turned off by him, right? For several reasons or another. But last year, his first full season in Dallas didn't have that bad of a year. 119 targets, 79 receptions. His 1,189 receiving yards, 7th most, and his 8 touchdowns, which is tied for 4th. Now, Amari Cooper, doesn't really come off as the big play guy in Dallas, right? We look at that as Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup is the field stretcher there. That's what he's typically looked at as. But maybe that's not entirely the case, because Amari Cooper last year did pretty well with the deep ball. He had 6 receptions of 40-plus yards, tied for 3rd. His 4 games of 100-plus receiving yards, tied for 4th. His 15 deep receptions was 2nd. His 503 deep yards was 3rd. His 17 catchable deep passes, tied for 2nd. And his 5 deep TDs, tied for 2nd as well. Dak Prescott was able to go down the field last year. Amari Cooper was able to haul those in. He was a big play threat for them. And there's one area that people really look at and say, this is why I'm not drafting Amari Cooper. Inconsistencies, right? We've talked about it for a while. Okay? Are inconsistencies overblown? Maybe they're long gone at this point. These are games since 2015 in which Amari Cooper scored 11 or more fantasy points. In 2015, it was 8 of 16. In 2016, it was 7 of 16. And then in 2017 and 2018, it was 5 of 14. So not great percentages, right? No. And I'll admit that. In the past, Amari Cooper has not been great with consistency. He gets a big game, and then he seems to disappear. But I think we need to go ahead and leave a little bit of history out of this, because one thing that a lot of fantasy owners make mistakes on is they look so much of the history, they forget about what is sitting there right in front of you. So for last season in 2019, things changed a little bit for Amari Cooper. Again, his first full season in Dallas. Games in which he had 10 or less points was 6. Games in which he had 11 or more points was 10. So yes, he has had some huge games and then come back with some duds. But that happens to a lot of wide receivers. The thing is that Amari Cooper, though, last year he lived with some really big games, 100%. But in terms of being under 10 points or being over 11 points, his inconsistencies were not off with other top wide receivers. I mean, Cooper Kupp is a guy that you're all trying to draft this year, right? Same thing for him last year. He had 6 games that were 10 points or less. He had 10 games that were 11 points or more. What about everybody's favorite wide receiver right now, it seems like? Chris Godwin, right? Well, 5 games last year of 10 or less points and 9 games of 11 or more points. So the guy that everybody wants to draft this year in Chris Godwin, well, about the same as Amari Cooper last year. And then the guy that is just the definition of consistency at the wide receiver position for basically the majority of my lifetime playing fantasy football, it seems like. But Julio Jones, almost the same exact numbers. 5 games of 10 or less points, 10 games of 11 or more points. So Amari Cooper, even though he does tend to be inconsistent, he is really about the same as other big named wide receivers if you're looking at breaking it down this way. Maybe we just think too much about Amari Cooper. Maybe we just expect too much out of him, right? Maybe you're setting yourself up for failure thinking about what you could possibly get from Amari Cooper every single season. Right now, depending on where you're drafting him, if you're getting him as your wide receiver 2, there are a lot of wide receiver 2s that are going to be inconsistent. You're getting a guy with a huge ceiling every single week, though. And we could see that ceiling reach an all-time high in 2020 because there is a chance that we could be seeing him move to the slot. Now, I know in Jake's video, he talked about there's no guarantee that Amari Cooper will be moving to the slot. And I get it. I understand that we're guessing at this point. But there's one thing that you might not know about Amari Cooper. And it's not necessarily the volume he's received in the slot, but it's how damn efficient he has been in the slot in the past. In 2015, his rookie year, he averaged 2.25 yards per route run. That was 6th among wide receivers that had at least 70 or more snaps in the slot. In 2016, he had 3.29 yards per route run in the slot. That was first among those with 70 or more snaps. In 2017, 2.21 yards per route run in the slot. Fifth among wide receivers with 70 or more snaps. In 2018, he did take a step back in terms of efficiency. That was when he had the awful start to the season with the Raiders, ended up being traded and went to the Cowboys. But after his trade to the Cowboys, he had 14 targets while lining up in the slot. He caught 11 of those for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. So his time in the slot while in Dallas, highly efficient again. And now last year in 2019, did not play in the slot much. But again, 2.72 yards per route run, which was second among wide receivers that played 70 or more snaps in the slot. Amari Cooper is a matchup nightmare if he plays in the slot. And if he plays in the slot, he is not going to get those number one cornerbacks. CeeDee Lamb, who's now with the Dallas Cowboys, yes, he played in the slot while he was at Oklahoma, and he did very, very well. But I want you to keep something in mind. Mike McCarthy is now the head coach in Dallas. We are in a very weird offseason right now where rookies are not really getting a chance to work out with their team, to get that type of connection with their quarterback. Amari Cooper has now been there for 1.5 seasons. He knows Dak Prescott. He knows the players around him. He knows what he's doing, okay? So there is a chance that Mike McCarthy coming into Dallas, needing to deliver a winning season as soon as possible and kind of get himself back up on a pedestal of being one of the better coaches in the NFL, looks towards the savvy veteran and puts him in the slot, knowing full well what he can get out of him there. Now, when it comes to the Mike McCarthy era and what he has done in the past with wide receivers in the slot, it is outstanding, and this is why this is very good news for Amari Cooper. Under McCarthy in 2014 and 2015, the Green Bay Packers led the NFL in slot targets. During those 2 seasons, Randall Cobb, who was the primary slot receiver, averaged 128 targets, 130 receptions, 1,058 yards, and 9 touchdowns. If you get anything close to that from Amari Cooper in the late third, early fourth round, maybe mid third round, whatever it may be, that is amazing numbers. And don't forget the 2018 Dallas slot receivers. These are the 3 guys that took all of the snaps at the slot. Randall Cobb, Tavon Austin, and Jason Witten. 190 vacated targets from those 3 players. They have a need in the slot now. That 2014 Green Bay Packers team, though, could end up looking a lot like the 2020 Dallas Cowboys because of their wide receiver setup. Let me talk to you about this real quick before we get out of here. In 2014, I already talked about Randall Cobb. An excellent season. Played in the slot, 127 targets, 91 receptions, 1,287 yards, and 12 touchdowns. But he was the wide receiver 2 in the slot because Jordy Nelson, who was the wide receiver 1, had 151 targets, 98 receptions, 1,519 yards, and 13 touchdowns. But what is really interesting here is a rookie wide receiver, his first year on that team, by the name of Davante Adams. 66 targets, 38 receptions, 446 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This could look a lot like Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. Now, I don't see these numbers working out directly. CeeDee Lamb is a rookie. Is he only going to get 66 targets, 38 receptions, 446 yards like Davante Adams? Probably not. Davante Adams was not nearly as highly regarded as CeeDee Lamb when he came out, okay? But it is a possibility that you put Amari Cooper in the slot, he gets some Randall Cobb-esque numbers, and then the Jordy Nelson numbers, they're kind of more split between CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. And you see more of an even number of targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns to those 2 on the outside. Because let's just be fair here. Nobody's going to be able to cover all the Dallas Cowboys. It is just not going to happen. But maybe one of your main concerns is right now, Kyle, what about Zeke Elliott? There's no way they can feed Zeke Elliott and they can get these guys this much volume in the passing game. Well, in 2014, Big Eddie Lacy had 246 rushing attempts for 1,139 yards, averaged 4.6 yards per carry, and had 9 touchdowns. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike McCarthy could absolutely be seeing the same type of team coming to fruition here in 2020 with the Cowboys that he saw in 2014 with his, at that time, Green Bay Packers. There's a lot of resemblances there between the two teams. Maybe you want to say Dak Prescott is nowhere as near as good as Aaron Rodgers is. That's fine. Fair. But Dak Prescott is darn good, and he has proved that, and he has earned the respect as being one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League now. He can get the ball out to all of those players. If Amari Cooper moves to the slot, huge year incoming. But even if he doesn't, there's no guarantee he's going to see the cornerback one every single week. They have way too many weapons there. And even if Amari Cooper doesn't sit in the slot the majority of his snaps, you can best bet he's going to be out there every once in a while. Even if he has a game where he goes out and he struggles against that cornerback one, and they see that and they need to get something going, they can flip it. They can move CeeDee Lamb outside, bring Amari Cooper inside, and now he gets maybe 15, 20 snaps before the game is over in the slot. So just because we say, oh, CeeDee Lamb was great in the slot, doesn't mean we're not going to see these players moved around quite often. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I think is a pretty darn good argument for Amari Cooper. Maybe I didn't win you over, and if I didn't, I get it. He's burned some of you in the past. But I think we need to look at what we have sitting in front of us and not necessarily what's been in the rearview mirror the entire time. So let me know in the comments below. Do I at least have you thinking about Amari Cooper? Was it at least a decent argument? I did my best. Jake told you not to draft Amari Cooper. I'm telling you to go for it. We'll see at the end of the season, and we'll talk more about it then. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my two of, because I've got more coming, two of my must-have wide receivers for the 2020 season. So do me a favor, if you appreciate that content, hit that like button down below, leave me a comment like I asked you to do, and of course, if this is your first time here at the Fantasy Headliners, then hit that subscribe button for me and become a part of Headliner Nation today. And let me know in the comments so I can personally welcome you. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, you can get your draft guide for $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com right now. And if you want even more exclusive Fantasy Headliners content, you can get that by going over to Patreon for as little as $5 a month. You can get extra content, including videos, including articles, and our new awesome podcast. Ladies and gentlemen of Headliner Nation, thanks so much for tuning into this video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.